Tyler, today we got John from Buildertrend, CTO. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
CTO? I had to look it up. Chief Technical Officer.
I figured it was something along the lines.
Yeah. Everyone's screaming at their radio right now. Like, you guys
Well,
are
I still
idiots.
don't even understand what CFO, CEO are exactly. So I'm just grouping it in along that same
Well,
thing.
you could use AI and it will tell you the difference between all of them.
It's
You know,
true.
but so John joins us today. We're talking about his role in Buildertrend and how it's been a big push or a big change for the company, and how he's looking to grow the business and really leverage customer feedback in doing so.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with him. I had like a list of questions I want to get into. Took a little bit of a different direction, which I'm perfectly fine with. And I think that it was very valuable, very useful. But as always, so much of the conversation, like he's a software engineer by trade, and so much of the information and the problems and what they're looking to solve within his industry is similar to ours. So it's really cool to see Buildertrend bring him in with his experience and what he's doing, and be able to really like cross that over to the construction market, and be able to help them. So it was neat to hear the problems, the struggles, why they actually brought him in, and how much of what he's doing to try and help solve problems and determine solutions for their product is people based. So I think you guys will enjoy this one. I did.
And this podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. If you're aiming to elevate your projects with a standout feature, look no further than Andersen's folding out swing doors. These impressive doors can span up to 48 feet wide and reach up to 10 feet tall, creating a grand entrance that's sure to impress.
The top hung system ensures smooth and easy operation, making installation and daily use a breeze. Plus, for those working in coastal areas, Andersen offers storm watch protection, providing peace of mind and durability against harsh weather conditions.
Enhance your builds with elegance and functionality with Andersen's folding out swing doors. Visit Andersen's website today to discover more about this product. And if you're thinking about introducing software to your business, but you're worried that your team might struggle to get started, here's what you're going to do. You're going to sign up for Buildertrend, the leading construction management platform for premier builders, and you're going to designate a champion.
What's a Buildertrend champion, you ask? It's a member of your team that ensures every employee has the tools and resources they need to master the platform. Buildertrend supports your champion, trains them, and encourages them so your company can onboard the software with ease under their guidance. When you have a Buildertrend champion, you'll
get the most out of your investment. You're going to speed up your daily processes and improve efficiency. You're going to give your team the best chance at reaching company goals, and you're going to drive business growth. Visit buildertrend.com/champion to sign up for Buildertrend and start your champion and your team on their journey to success. And I'm not going to announce it today, but we got a new sponsor joining us on the show. But you guys will have to wait till next week to find out who it is. John, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We briefly met in Vegas.
I
don't even know. I don't know if we said more than a couple words to each other, but
okay.
I'm happy to have you on the podcast. I have so many questions for you.
You don't look 6'9" on a podcast.
Yeah, well, that's deceptive.
Apparently. I was listening to another podcast with you, and you had mentioned that you were that tall, and I was like, damn, all the pictures that I saw of you, I was like, you don't put two and two together.
You know, people doubt me sometimes, and I think it's because I'm fairly well proportioned, and so like that's where people like are skeptical.
Yeah, most people that get that tall and they're just like lanky.
I guess so.
Like a string bean. I feel like Shaq is tall.
Jacked.
Shaq is tall and big.
Everyone says I'm jacked. I don't know about that. It's a joke they have, I think. But
I know. Well, I mean, I wasn't gonna bring it up, but everyone was like, you know, John got us on creatine. I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life, and me and Dan had a 90-minute conversation about creatine intake and like how it's been great for our health and our mental clarity. And then it was just like one after the other was chiming in. Like even people that weren't at Buildertrend were like, I take it too. I started taking it 6 months ago. I feel great. And it was, but it all centered around it, like the introduction to who you are. And I was like, this is a hilarious way to be introduced to someone.
I always say it's the biggest impact I've had at Buildertrend is the whole executive team's taking creatine. And it's funny, like I went to a dinner pretty early on and Steve Duggar, who's one of the founders, was like, everyone was talking about it. And I'm not a promoter of it in any way, but he was like, give me your sales pitch. And I'm like, I didn't have any sales pitch. I used to show up to exec meetings and be drinking it. And people always asked me what it was. And then I was joking with myself, this is my sales pitch right here. You know, I was joking,
right.
What I feel like people used to take creatine in high school, and then
That's
you
what
didn't
everyone
hear a lot
says.
about it.
So I took it in high school. I played college basketball, small time college basketball, and then there was a lot of like they were concerned that it damaged your liver and I found this too because my doctor, when I started taking it, said your creatinine levels are really high, and I said, yeah, I take creatine, and he said, that's associated with liver damage. And then I said, I don't think so. Let me show you the 5 studies from like Harvard. You know, it's like every medical school study.
Yeah.
People have been taking it for 20 years now. And so there's no real harmful effects, but that was the fear back then. I stopped taking it. I remember back then. And it's just been debunked. And then I think there's all this recent evidence that people believe and I, you know, around like cognitive enhancement and things like that. And I took it. I just literally am kind of a little bit of I'm a experimenter. I'll try new things all the time. And I'm up there in age, and I work out a lot. I like to be really active. And I just found that when I take it, I can recover a lot faster. I don't get sore and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I go off it every once in a while, and I see, and so I like have the difference. And there you go.
I have to check it out.
Yeah,
but everyone says the same thing, Tyler. Like Meg, I've been taking it for a little over a year, and Meg was like, I just feel like that's what everyone took in high school. Yeah. And I'm like, it's the same concept or the same, everyone has that same like memory.
It was like the meathead thing to take.
Yeah. But it was also like, I mean, we're not going to get into this entirely, but it was also like people were just not overdosing, but taking massive dosages. And then all of the health stuff that, you know, from my little knowledge and research is like, well, they were taking so much that they were just becoming super dehydrated. They weren't drinking enough water. And it just was like, that's why there was so much negativity around it, where it's like, but there's a huge benefit to it, especially if you're super active, like you said, John. It's like the recovery of it. But yeah, it's funny how I feel like it's.
Do you feel like it helps
huge
with
resurgence
stuff other than recovery, like general overall, like
muscle
your energy
growth
levels and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, supposedly what it does is it allows you to store more ATP in your muscles. And I'm not like an expert on this, but ATP is kind of what allows you to put out and exert force. And so there's a lot of people that say like, oh, you can lift more, and obviously the more you lift, the more you gain if you're really into lifting weights and things like that. I've never experienced any of that. And I like go off it for a month, and I'm really like lifting weights is kind of one of my things that I do a lot now. And I know pretty much exactly what I lift, and I don't really experience that part of it. And I don't know, the cognitive part, I'm not sure about it either. That's hard to judge, obviously, but I definitely notice a big difference. Like I'll get really sore afterwards after working out. And when I'm taking creatine, I don't get sore usually at all. That's cool. So it's pretty significant.
It's weird. I don't enjoy getting sore, but I feel like it's confirming, or like it's like confirming that I was doing whatever I had to do.
Right. That was a good workout. I can't walk down the stairs.
It's like, all right. So I try and ride my dirt bike once a week, and like pretty aggressively. And I started tracking like how much calories you're burning, what your heart rate is, and I noticed that like when I'm out by myself, it's a much greater workout than when I'm out riding with other people, because you're stopping, you're talking, you're taking breaks. So when I go ride by myself, generally I'm sore afterwards, but I'm not sore when I ride with other people. And I'm like, oh yeah, that like if I wake up on Monday or Tuesday and I'm still sore from riding, I'm like, that was a good ride.
Yeah, there's some truth. I grew up with that like kind of notion too, except for the one thing is if you want to go out and ride the next day and you're a little sore,
Correct.
you're less likely to do it. And so that's the trick. By the way, part of the reason I experimented with in high school is this might be even hard to believe, but I'm 6'9". I was 6'9" in high school, or almost. I was 6'8", I think. And my senior year, I weighed 185 pounds and I weigh about 260 right now.
Yeah.
And so I was like trying everything, like protein powders, anything. You know?
You were not proportionate. So my like best friend growing up was 6'10", and he died when he was 19, but I don't know if he was 200 pounds, like
No.
even at that point. And like he was skinny. I mean,
Yeah.
to be that height, even like he had muscle, but like it's just there. It's so much to put weight on. And like I know his brothers now who are older, and none of them are as tall as him, and they did finally fill out some, but it wasn't until they were like 45 years old.
Oh wow, yeah. I think like I started to in college finally, but and that's when I stopped growing. Basically, the whole
Yeah.
time I was growing, it was impossible to put on weight.
Hold on. How tall were you when you went into high school?
That's actually people ask me like, how tall were you in sixth grade? How tall? And I don't remember any of those. But in high school, since I played basketball, you start to write down your height. And I remember
Yeah.
I was 6'5" as a freshman.
Yeah, that's still tall. So I was one of those. I didn't go through puberty until I was maybe a junior in high school. So I went into high school 119 pounds and graduated 189 pounds. So like I grew a ton in high school,
Wow.
um, and was like very small when I went into high school. And I'm 6'3" now, but I wasn't close to that. So like most of my growth was in high school, and then it took me until like I'm 38 now, like 36, 37 before I started like filling out at all. And not that I'm filled out now, but I was like, eat whatever I wanted, do whatever I wanted, not do whatever I wanted. And I was always just like very consistently skinny.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. That's why a lot of athletes are overweight, is because you have this period of your life where you can just eat and do whatever you wanted. And I used to I
You're
think I was
so
in my
active.
40s. Yeah, I was so active. Like I was burning so much. I played basketball into my 40s. And I remember it was when I turned about 40 that I started to realize like, oh, I can't just eat whatever I want anymore. And
Yeah.
I got pretty heavy actually for a while, and I had to really adjust my lifestyle. It's a whole nother story probably, but
Yeah. I kind of feel like I'm like, um,
Stoffer.
I started 38. I turned 38 January 2nd, and I'm like, it's the first year where I feel like if I don't either exercise more consistently or watch what I eat more consistently, that I could potentially just like continue to gain weight
Yeah.
rather than like, oh, you'll gain 5 pounds and then it's just like it shifts. But I'm 200 pounds. You know, I'm close to the same size that I still wear clothes from high school. Like I haven't grown a lot, but I feel like I could easily put on weight now if I ate the same way that I did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Not good weight.
Well, I did that. I don't recommend it.
Oh man, but this is why Buildertrend hired you, right?
Yeah, it was all about they wanted to bring up the average height, and they were, hoping to learn about creatine and, all that. That's why I'm at Buildertrend.
No, they're going to be very excited to hear your outlook on this podcast.
Yeah, I do
So
joke.
John, you started and you founded a company called Appfolio,
Hmm.
and you went on to. Am I correct in saying that you went on to sell that company?
No, it went public, and it's still a public company, still active. I just saw that it's sometimes hard for me not to say we since it's my baby, but they're going to do $720 million in revenue this year. So it's a public company. The ticker symbol's APPF. I co-founded it with one other gentleman who's an amazing human being by the name of Klaus Schauser. And yeah.
And you're not involved in it at all?
No, I mean, I'm still a shareholder, but
Yeah.
I'm not involved at all. Buildertrend's actually the fourth company I've been the CTO at. I've
Since
done,
Appfolio, or
no, I did two prior to Appfolio, both were acquired. And then Appfolio was kind of obviously the biggest success, but the previous two were pretty successful too. Um, and so I've kind of been very entrepreneurial my whole life and building tech companies. And Yeah, property management there's a lot of similarities to the construction management space. There's if you look at property management businesses, a lot of them are kind of relatively small from an employee count, 10, 20
Mm-hmm.
employees. They're generational businesses where a lot of them have been passed down a couple generations. Um, I would say they're kind of slower adopters for technology too. And yeah, and obviously it's like it's management around a physical asset, which obviously construction management is all about managing and building physical assets. So there's a lot of similarities.
It's that is interesting because when I think of construction, like from your perspective, it's managing a physical asset. But like when I look at it, even one of the questions I had for you is like to build a tech company around managing construction. I think of construction so much as like abstract and qualitative than quantitative. And like it is a very numbers based business. And I think that when you're brought up in the business, it's more about making people happy and understanding what people need, when in actuality, like it is numbers driven and it is about managing an asset. But like my question was how are you taking the feedback from customers, which in my opinion would be more qualitative and like these abstracts from them, and then transforming that into data driven information or like the quantitative information?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that um, when I say this, I say everything I say about the construction management business with as much humility as possible. I've been in the industry a year, and so I know that I don't know much yet. Um, but I think all businesses, especially smaller business or small to medium businesses, they have problems they're trying to solve. And for construction management, it's things like estimating and managing a schedule and communicating with homeowners and things like that. And so um, I think it's really difficult to build a great technology product that helps customers solve problems unless you're talking to customers all the time.
Yeah.
And so you're asking you asked like more specific question about how do you help with data driven decisions. Um, I hope that we help with processes, data driven decisions. I hope that we help them digitize their business. I've actually talked, one thing that's interesting in this industry, which I have not seen in a lot of industries, is I've talked to a lot of customers who have tried to build their own solution for
Yeah.
construction management. And it's really surprising to me, actually. And I understand it. Like, it's kind of maybe there weren't great solutions for a long time, and maybe they were even forward thinking. And they're like, we need to digitize our businesses. And they kind of like got that before other people. But building your own solution, that's a really tough route to go. It'd kind of be like me, like going, like, I know how to put up some drywall. I'm going to go build my own house,
But it's
like,
Yeah, but,
literally
but
every small construction company is trying to build their own solutions.
yeah,
yeah.
and I think we talk about this a lot. I don't think it really is a forward thinking. I'm not as an insult to the industry, but I think it's truly because they are small companies. They're getting into it because of the craft and the actual handwork, and they're forced into figuring out how to reduce the time to quote unquote run the business. And what happens is that process, there's no established process in the beginning. So they get 2, 3, 4 steps down the road, and then they try to compile that into a system. And that system is different than everyone else. And I've said this for a long time. It would be amazing if we just all said, hey, oh, you want to start a construction company? Here's step one. Like, here's everything that you need, and just plug in what you need, and standardizing the process in which a company is ran, because it's wild that everyone does it differently. Just I would say that in our market, we're probably the most forward thinking in terms of technology and utilizing technology. And we still have Excel sheets that we've created to do certain tasks because it just makes sense for us. And there's the whole other side of this where it's like, well, Buildertrend can't be everything for everyone. That would be impossible. No app, no program is going to be everything for everyone. It's figuring out how to make the most for the most. And but again, you have these opportunities where it's like, well, that doesn't work, so I'll just create my own. And I just think that the bigger picture here is, whether it's Buildertrend or whether it's someone that says, all right, let's just package up, starting a construction company for dummies. Like literally having this box that you buy and it's like, here's how you price work, here's what you do, here's you input the data, what's your end result. And I mean, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole of AI, but like this is where AI is going to come into play, where it's like, this is what I want the end result of my company to be. I want to do $10 million in revenue with this many employees, blah, 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 blah. What do I need to do? And it's going to say, this is what you need to do. And then you work backwards from that.
I definitely believe that great software products help people perform with best practices. And I'll tell you, actually, that's a big change we made at Buildertrend since I got here. And it was kind of what you said. Like, I think before I got here, we were kind of trying to be everything to everyone. And that's really tough. It's really tough to have a great product that tries to be everything to everyone. And when I got here, there was a lot. It didn't start with me, but I kind of really took our product engineering resources and focused around them. We call them the established general contractor. It's like, that's not exactly the right term, but it's basically established businesses. If you're just starting out and you're building one house, like I don't know if you need a system quite yet. You've got to figure out how to build that first house.
Yeah.
But if you're at the point where you're like, oh, I've got a couple employees and I've started to build a couple of houses, you need a system, and you start to realize it. Interestingly, in this industry, a lot of people, I've seen two cases. I've seen build it yourself, which, like, to me, I do like that. Just seems like in any business, if you're doing something that's significant effort that's outside of your core competency, that's not good for the business. Like, good businesses outsource things that aren't their core competencies, and they focus on their core competencies, and that's why they're successful. And so to me, that's a case of that. I've also heard the kind of like, I've been doing construction for a long, long time, and maybe they're just holding out to retire and they're not passing it along to their kids or whatever. And, I've done it without technology for a long time. And I get that too. Like, I understand, like, change is hard for everyone. I've had like a couple of like interesting discussions there where I've bought a few houses in the last few years, and every single home inspection I've gotten has been using home inspection software. And I don't know what that industry is like, but I assume it's like there's heavy use of home inspection software, because I haven't seen anything that isn't that. And I just kind of go like, how can it be harder to inspect a home than to build one? You've got to be using software. You're going to be at a competitive disadvantage at some point. And then I also know that just consumer expectations have changed so radically. Everyone's got an iPhone, and everyone's kind of thinking that, I know this, I expect every business to behave like the apps that I'm used to dealing with. I want to know my car is coming around the corner to pick me up. I want to know Domino's is putting the pepperoni on my pizza. And I have those expectations, and I'm building a home actually myself right now. And I have those expectations of my builder. And even when I say that to people who are like, I've been doing it the same way for a long time, they kind of know that they're disappointing their homeowners, that homeowner experience isn't that great. And so, I hope that we can really help those people by making it easy to solve their business problems with technology, giving them software that helps them do best practices. That's really what I'm trying to do at Buildertrend.
It's so much of the problem within the industry is that, like, we don't have sustainable and viable businesses, and generally it's all these small companies, and they're not, like, what they're good at and what they're doing are two different things, or like they're doing what they're good at, and that's where they're looking to capitalize their market, and then everything else they're just doing for free, which I think breeds multiple issues within the industry. But then you have, like, I think that another issue is then you bring Buildertrend into the mix, and most people are probably looking to Buildertrend as a way to become more profitable while still maintaining, like, so we're going to create efficiencies and we're still going to be at the same price point, where it's like, why can't we create efficiencies, be offering something else with Buildertrend, be at a higher price point, and now we're actually able to charge more and we're making more through our efficiencies. But, like, our business mentality is construction is like, there's no money in it. You can't make enough money. You can't support raising your prices. So we're going to get Buildertrend, and that's going to actually make us money by efficiencies and systems and not necessarily changing our price.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it's a fundamental flaw that lots of small businesses have, where they're afraid to charge a price that allows the business to be successful. And this is actually something I've taught on the technology side a lot. That we do this process called market validation, which is basically like the way software has typically been built, especially like if you go to Silicon Valley or something, is someone comes up with an idea, you hire some engineers, you start to build it. If you're in the Silicon Valley, you've raised some money, and so now you say, wow, we've got almost an alpha of this product. We've got to hire some salespeople. We'll hire some marketing people. And then you go, wow, we're about to release this. Let's hire more salespeople. Let's hire a PR firm. And then you go and launch it. And then that's when you learn everything.
Yeah.
And that's why they talk about pivots there. And so, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought.
Market validation.
Yeah. So market validation, the idea behind market validation is, instead of like doing all that building and then discovering, learning everything, you want to do that up front. You basically sell a product before you have it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some subtleties to that, right? Because you're selling something you don't have now. But the key there is really understanding what you're offering to your customer and testing whether you can be successful with it as a business. And what I've taught people to do there is, you have to actually put the customer to a buying decision. And that means you have to not be afraid to tell them that we're going to charge something for this, and we're going to charge something that's going to make our business successful. And that's really hard to do. I've actually worked with people who flat out can't do it. It's just not in their DNA to have that kind of discussion. And it's really hard to do market validation with them, because someone starts to say like, I think that's too much. They're going to like totally back down, or they won't even ask the price. And the people that I've seen do it really well are kind of really ambivalent to what the customer says, in the way that they take it all in as information. They're not afraid of getting offended when the customer's upset if you ask too much. They're not afraid of like being honest that you need to be a profitable business. What good is starting a business that's not going to be around for a while, maybe not even be around long enough to perform on the work that you've agreed to with your customer? Seems like it's tricky. I understand how hard it is when you're kind of starting and hustling a business. I've started companies, but I think I would hope that if that's a one mindset that I'd love to change everywhere, not just in the construction industry, if I could, is we all need to be successful, and we all need to be fair to each other and be making a profit.
I feel like so much of that is often driven by ego, and like, this is my baby, this is my company that I'm building, and like, I just have to make this work. And I think what ends up happening is, it's just such a slow, like steady grind, and you're constantly treading water and just trying to keep your head from going under. It's not until you're at the breaking point that you actually go back and inventory how much time's going into it and what you're actually making, to realize that you're making pennies on the dollar and it's not a viable business. Where like, it's easy enough to do that all up front, but it's almost as if you have these blinders on, and because it's your baby, you're unwilling to accept the fact that your business model doesn't work.
Yeah, I think construction may be somewhat unique in that, although I think there's other businesses like that, in that you can kind of go and be having like a successful business in that you're building things but not making any money, and it's really easy to kind of hide the fact that you're discounting all your time and everything, and just that's where I've definitely seen already stories of people just like really burning themselves out, or having a very successful construction company that they just started and it's year one and they realize they're like $100,000 in debt. And I've heard those stories a lot. And I think it's somewhat unique there, in that you can kind of almost have this false sense of success, where a lot of businesses, that's not possible.
I also feel like it's because we feel as contractors or builders that the only sale or number that we're able, like cost that we're able to capture, is the cost of work being put in place. So it's like, yeah, I can only charge you when my employees on the clock, right? Where like they're actually at the job site with the tool belt on. And so when you're small, that's where your money's coming in, and then everything else that you're doing is free. And then people grow and they continue along with that mindset. And then they're like, well, I can't wear the tool belt anymore. I need to just land the work for everyone. So now their people in the field are making the work. They're not charging any money for themselves. And now it's like, yeah, I have $2-3 million in the sales, and I'm taking home like $70,000. And it's like the exposure, the risk, the liability makes no sense. You could go work anywhere else and make better, safer money than that, or not work and just not put yourself in that position. But I think that like our mindset and our mentality is, if you're not on the job, you cannot, it's not a billable rate to a customer. And you have to understand that like that billable rate and everything else that you're doing on the back end has to be built into that billable rate. And that's where you're capturing that.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think from the customer's perspective, the homeowner, I don't think that they necessarily think like that. Usually I want my bathroom remodeled at a certain rate, or I want a home built. And I'm not thinking about like, what are you charging me every hour? I'm kind of thinking like, what's that total cost?
Yeah.
And so it's actually a disconnect from what the customer thinks, the way the customer thinks about it. Which, that's one thing that I've also done in my technology career, is really try to align whatever pricing or packaging we're using for a technology product with the success of our customers. And that's something we've been talking about at Buildertrend, actually, is like, how do we do an even better job of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same, like your mentality. A lot of like, so oftentimes we blame the market, we blame the customer base, we blame who we're selling the jobs. But even in your situation or your example, where it's like, all right, you're going to pay $20,000 for a bathroom remodel. When we take that $20,000, we now allocate all of those costs to tangibles on that job, rather than $5,000 of that needs to go to running my business in the back end right off the bat. Like that budget is being eaten up by tile, my labor, sub trades, and you're not actually accounting for anything business related, because you like the budget doesn't seem to afford that. Where if you understand your numbers and your processes and your systems, you realize like, yeah, I can sell a bathroom for $20,000, but it cannot be $20,000 plus a concession on all of my back end business management. Like it needs to be $15,000 plus the money that takes to run the bathroom. It can't just be $20,000 worth of work put in place in the job. And I don't think that we do a good job of one, just like capturing all of that information to be able to sell it. And it's like what you just said, like if I go to the table and I understand what the cost of that job is, like I'm not going to be offended if a customer tells me it's too much, because I know what it takes to do it. It's when I'm unsure of my numbers and they say $25,000 for a bathroom, that's insane. Somebody would do it for 15. And at that point, when I understand my numbers and what goes into it, I'm like, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I get that. I can't give you this for 15. And I think that that's like the big discrepancy.
But I think along that lines, John, you said something a couple minutes ago, is, people are afraid to charge appropriately or charge enough for their work. But I would argue that it's not just that. Oftentimes it's, people do get in a position where they are charging more and more and more, but that it's a product of inefficiency, where it's like, hey, this home's going to take me, 18 months to build it. It's like, well, if you could find a way to do it in 12 months, you might be more, or let me back up, because I deal with this with a lot of our trades, and I've talked about this a lot, is, when a trade is giving us a price on something, happened today. The trade gave me a price, and I said, how do I get this within my budget? The budget I'm trying to hit. Not your problem, my problem, but what could I do to hit this budget? And they were like, well, if you can limit the amount of times that we show up to do finish, that's always where we get killed. We come out and have to mobilize a dozen times. And he's like, I can save you, a couple thousand, like $5,000 on the overall cost. And I said to him, I'm like, great, let's operate on that lower number. And it will, you can have a contingency in there. If I don't hit my deliverable, then you can bill me the extra $5,000. But the point of that is, he is now pricing work at a higher price because of the constant inefficiency he faces on every job. So his pricing becomes more expensive. And if I take that for face value, then my pricing becomes more expensive. And then now I'm giving a client $1 million price to do something, which is basically baking in all of these inefficiencies across 16 different trades. And it's like, well, the reality is like maybe that project could be 800,000 if I had just looked at every line and just understood what can I be doing to be more efficient, and not just operate under the understanding that I need to charge more money.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, like efficiency of a business matters. And I've actually noticed this, that some of our most successful customers, they have some background in commercial construction.
Yeah.
And part of that is they're used to running really disciplined businesses. Now, I believe, though, that you're kind of making the argument of like, it's really important to really track what's going on and know your financials and know where you stand on a project. And that's where I think like software is such a big help. And we've really poured a lot of work into the estimating functionality we have. And it's really interesting. We had been hearing for a long time that cost plus is a big deal. And obviously, like, I think that model is very compelling because it kind of builds in profit. It's like, and it's transparent to the homeowner. So like, I think that feels good in some ways to the homeowner too. It's like, here's what it's going to cost me and here's my profit. And one really interesting thing is we had kind of this notion that 30% of builders were doing cost plus contracts, of our customers, I should say. And we actually launched our first version of cost plus. We're continuing to evolve it, but we launched it in March, I believe. And we actually just hit 30% of our customers like 3 months later. And so it kind of was like a real eye opener. I just heard that stat the other day and I was like, wow. And I had just talked to a customer actually yesterday. I try to talk to customers as much as I can to learn as much as I can since I'm still learning. And he was telling me, yeah, I really am thinking about going to cost plus. So I know that it's at least 30% plus one that's a cost plus customer. But I guess my point is like, having software to help you with that and help you with profitability and efficiency. And I know a lot of efficiencies around schedule. And I've heard similar things around ordering materials. Suppliers of materials can give you a lower cost if you're not going to like call them 10 times to, supplement orders because you haven't planned very well. But if you are going to do that, they need to charge you more because it's not efficient for them to constantly be going out to the site.
But that's the basis of their pricing, is that you are going to call and change stuff. That's how they've based their pricing, because they're taking the average of all of these relationships. I think we operate cost plus, but I don't think it's the appropriate way. It's just our reaction to not planning. If we had, if we had a drawing set that was 100% figured out, what would prevent us from being able to have an accurate price on that? And everyone's always like, well, what happens when the client changes something? It's like, that's a change order. We're operating under these cost plus models because we get a drawing set that's 20 pages, and then we go through it and nothing is really defined. So we're making all of these assumptions, and it's hard to operate on that. So we make all of these assumptions, but all the risk is on the client. Where I would love to be in a position where we're only working with, I'm going to say a team, because there's lots of people involved in like getting the information on paper, but a team that takes the time to get to 100%, designed, where it's, hey, we have now worked on pre-construction for 6 months. We know all of the information we need. We know what we're building. You've made all of your selections. And the moment you have a signature on that contract, I'm going to go issue POs for all this stuff so I can lock in my pricing and order material and schedule this stuff. And what? Like, what other inefficiencies, would I be trying to capture within the cost plus model? It's like, well, what happens if you underestimate how long it's going to take you? It's like, well, that comes with experience. And if you don't have the experience to estimate properly, well, then you need to find someone that does. Like you said, like you can't be doing these really important tasks if it's not your strong suit. And I think
Yeah,
that,
that's. Oh,
no,
sorry.
please.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, I finished my thought.
I was going to say, I mean, I think that's really interesting. And I obviously don't know the construction business, but there's a lot of overlaps with building software. And software, the way people build software has evolved. In the 80s, it was try to specify everything up front to the smallest detail. This button's going to go here, and try to figure everything out. And like, let's fight change like crazy. And it was kind of this assumption that building software was a scientific process. And actually, it kind of evolved like starting in the late 90s, but early 2000s until now, where it's become like, you may have even heard the term agile software development. And the idea is that you're building software over a long period of time. It's changing over a long period of time. There's change that happens. The technologies change. The customer that you're dealing with, I have this kind of like analogy I use where we're all really bad at telling people what the solution is we want. And the thing that I say is like, if you ask me like, what is some app I need? And I told you, I would do a very bad job describing it. But if I picked up my phone and picked one of my favorite apps, I could tell you the 13 things that are wrong with it and that I would like to work a little differently. And so I think some of those analogies, I think maybe carry over to construction, where it's like, I'm building a house. So like, I'm reading plans. I can't read plans. I mean, it's not like I'm not smart enough. I've looked at them a lot, but I can't picture like, what does the living room look like? You know, I can't feel it the same way I could. And I know as soon as they start building it, I'm going to go, you know, move this corner over here or whatever. And so if it has those elements, then the idea of perfectly specifying everything may not even be possible. Maybe it is for certain types of homes, and that's maybe where you're even going. But I think for certain types of homes, it's probably not. And then you have to have a way to deal with change. And there is a process, obviously, in construction, which is change orders. And the house I'm building is in Hawaii, and I like, when I came into the industry, I actually thought everyone's a cost plus builder, because in Hawaii, no one is not a cost plus builder. And the reason why is because well before the pandemic and all this stuff happened, they have to ship all the materials over there. And that's very unpredictable. You have no idea when you're going to get it. The costs change all the time. And so they were all cost plus builders, because you couldn't operate any other way.
It's so interesting to hear, because I know people in Hawaii that, you know, run businesses, and they talk about that constantly. Like there's this guy on Instagram I follow, Chemo. I believe his name is Chemo, but he runs this company called TrueX. He's an excavating contractor, and he's talked about getting parts for his machines. When like something breaks, he's shipping it from the States, and it's a royal pain in the ass. And we have stuff shipped from Europe, like material shipped from Europe, and they're like, yeah, it's gonna be there 3 to 4 weeks. It shows up 3 and 4 weeks. It's so like, I'm like, why is that? Why does that seem to be an easier move?
Because it's coming from the United States.
That's fair. It's like we left California, and now we're going around the world. Yeah, it's like it's not a well machine.
But what's interesting is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's interesting is my builder is cost plus, and I like that. It was very transparent, but they actually did do a decent job. They upfront did a full like bid on it and kind of gave me a sense of what it was going to cost. And we did some value engineering, and they come out of the commercial construction. They also have built some like larger hotels and things like that. And so they had this whole model where I paid up front for some of the estimating and work they were going to do. And, they kind of operate almost a hybrid model, but the real model is cost plus.
It's John. That's exactly what we do. So we basically put together a full estimate that, you know, depending on how much information we have, we target to be under 5% contingency, meaning that under 5% of that hasn't been deciphered yet. And so we're getting hard bids, and it's exactly that. We take a pre-construction retainer. We're getting paid for doing that. But that's the whole point. That's the value in going through pre-construction, is that, sure, contractually it is cost plus, but you're signing a document that says, you know, yes, you will pay whatever it costs plus a fee. but we've also done the work to make sure that whatever that cost is, we have a good sense that this is going to be within 5%.
Yep.
And I think that is the appropriate way to approach cost plus, where there's protection, but there's also value to the client side, such as yourself, rather than swinging for the fences and saying, hey, this is a rough price, but the price is the price. And I hear that conversation. I talked to someone today, and they were like, yeah, we were super frustrated with our builder because we signed this contract. He gave us an estimate, and then when stuff was way off his budget, he's like, cost what it is. It's cost plus. You pay me whatever it costs. Like, that's just not fair. It's like you're basically, it's like a bait and switch.
Yeah, there's some saying, and I'm not going to get exactly right, but it's like frustration is when you have missed expectations. And that's really what it's all about. And so when you set bad expectations for someone, that's when they get frustrated. That's when they get angry. It's not like when you're really upfront with someone and you're really honest about them. And I get it. There's like a real challenge here, especially you're talking, Tyler, about like small businesses. It's a real challenge. You're trying to get you're trying to sign your first customers, and
Yep.
that's a really hard thing. But I think like if you plan to run a business that's going to be long-term successful, you need to build on that foundation of having a great relationship with your customers. And that has to be with honesty and integrity and setting the right expectations.
And I think that also circles back on like what you were saying about the software technology and the development and being agile with that. Like, it is to what Nick said, where he's like, I want every spec for everything. And I used to be the same way, where I want everything completely, the design absolutely exhausted so that I could cover my ass. When I've found that there's a way to cover my ass, that I don't have to have that design completely cooked, because I can assume the liability by writing whatever missing spec and just setting an expectation for that, where it's like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but rather than spend another 2-3 weeks trying to get the answers, I'm going to write the scope, the assumption, the spec based on what I'm going to do, and I'm going to put a budget on that that's going to cover my customer to be able to get them towards where they want to be. And as we progress through this project, when I get to that point, we figure out a solution that meets the customer's expectation while trying to maintain budget there. And it's freed myself up to be able to make the money that I need to, because now I'm not locked into something where I had every single spec and I missed something. And like, well, they're like, well, you knew what it was supposed to be beforehand. Now, like, there's a lot of things that I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing them, but I'm going to make assumptions that are going to cover my ass and protect me, and we'll be able to figure this out on the fly, because as soon as a shovel hits the ground, it's going to change anyway. Like what you anticipated, and it goes to how everyone bid everything, what they thought the sequencing was going to be like on a job. Everything changes. So it's almost like, be able to have the relationship with your customer, the number, the software, the systems like Buildertrend to back everything that you're proposing to them, and then using that to manage it on the back end and meet the expectations of the customer. And I think that it can really lead to like a successful, profitable construction business.
I see why people listen to your guys' podcast. You guys have like a lot of best practices right here. I'm like learning a whole bunch of new stuff myself. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of it's just made up as we go, because it's like, this didn't work.
Oh, that's good. We're both doing that. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, the longer that you do it, you realize that like going rate is made up. Like, best practice is made up. And like, even I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody today where he's like, the numbers are right for the jobs that he's doing. Like the overall number, he's an owner operator who's doing kitchens for $150,000 and he's not making money. And I'm like, because you went from the mindset of, I'm landing $100,000 kitchens, and now I'm landing 150, and you're just using that as an opportunity to put more shit into that kitchen, where it's like, no, you should be building more profit into that. And like, the customer loves it because you're over executing on everything. But if you were giving them the choice between the 100,000 and the 150, and they had to pay for the upgrades, that customer might be fine with the $100,000 kitchen. Like they might not want to spend the extra 50, and you're just giving them all those things because it's what you want to do. And your execution, like you're putting more time into that job than you should, and you're not managing how much time's going into that job. And like the bigger jobs, the bigger numbers, the more comprehensive design doesn't mean that you're making any more money. It doesn't just all of a sudden it's like now I'm landing $300,000 kitchens. I'm going to make so much more money. No, you actually may make less money because now their expectations higher. And I think that like, again, I learned all of this by full transparency. I don't use Buildertrend because I don't do enough work, but like I track everything on my projects. And that's where it's like, if I did more work than I did, I would have to use something like Buildertrend because there's no way to guarantee that you're making your money if you don't have a system or a software that's actually making all of that information like very transparent, and you're able to like gauge some sort of metric for what those numbers look like. Because if you're just doing it based on the overall cost of the job and how long it's going to take, there's no way to manage that job on a shorter interval to guarantee that everyone's making their money.
It's interesting because the way that kitchen analogy you're using, there's so many things that like overlap between software development and construction. And I don't want to overemphasize that, but there's actually even like whole fields of computer science that actually came out of construction. There's this whole thing called design patterns. You can actually buy books about it. And like the whole analogy is around there's patterns for building houses and rooms. And like, we should have that for software. And there's a whole books about it. But the thing that you remind me of the kitchen, I talk a lot with my teams about kind of I use the term ruthlessly focused. And the idea is kind of really building exactly what the customer needs, getting it in their hands, getting feedback, and then finding out what the next thing is they really need. And it reminds me a little bit of the 100,000 to the $150,000 dollar kitchen. And part of what makes a business successful is actually understanding and putting on yourself constraints that help you be successful. And that's what I do with like kind of our teams with a ruthless focus. It's like, let's constrain what we're doing here, so we're doing only the most important things. And I would say like, that's kind of similar to that. You want to constrain the kitchen you're building to exactly what the customer needs and not just inflate it to whatever the dollars are you happen to have.
Correct.
And you're probably going to build a kitchen that they're happier with. You know, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of stuff they don't even really use or want in that $150,000 kitchen. There might be
that probably cost you money to implement as well.
Right.
And it's like, if you and I learned that when I kind of switched from more of like a time or like a lump sum to more time and material cost plus, whatever you want to call it. But it's like when you put the decision of how the money's being spent in the customer's hands. I had customers who I worked for with a lump sum budget first and then went to essentially time and material. And when I gave them the decision to choose how much money and time they wanted to throw at a job, when it was time and material, they lowered their expectation way down versus when it was lump sum. When it was lump sum, and all the expectation was just like hypothetical on paper, no way to actually gauge that. Yeah, we want 110%. Everything has to be perfect. There can be no mistakes. But then when they're paying me hourly in the same exact house, and it's like, well, for me to make that perfect, it's going to cost twice as much. Do you want to do that? No, that's good enough. And it's like you have to approach it from that mindset where like, of course they're going to love it. Why wouldn't they love it? But if they understand like what it actually should cost them, they're probably fine with something less.
Yeah. I mean, I would even argue, and I don't want to take this analogy too far, but they're probably going to focus you on the things that really matter to them.
Yeah.
You know, like I want the counters to be tall because I'm 6'9". Like, let's make sure that happens. I don't care that it's the highest end possible tile that we could get. I'm okay with kind of middle of the road there.
Yep.
And so it's actually like really good information, I think. And that's kind of what we try to do with our teams. It's like, if you're like constraining what you're doing and really doing the most important things, then you can get feedback on what is really important.
Yeah. And I think at that point, you're building and you're suiting the needs of your customers. And if you understand where your numbers are and what it costs you to be in work, and you have a system for really being able to gauge all of that, you're guaranteeing yourself success in business because your customers are happy, you're making the money that you need to, and now you're not putting a ton of money into budget on these very expensive waterfall countertops with these crazy veneered edge details where it's like they just don't give a shit about any of that. They just want them taller. So
Mhm.
now like you're able to make the money that you need while not creating more issues for yourself.
I'm glad that analogy kind of worked. I wasn't sure where it was going to go.
No, absolutely. And Nick and I with the podcast, like that's why we enjoy having professionals or just people who have different industry outlooks, because I always said that like from a business perspective there's so many things that transcend just construction or just
Hmm.
software, and like the problems that you deal with are so similar to the problems that we deal with. They're business related problems, and it easily is applicable from one industry to another. And a lot of times it like reaffirms what you're doing or really helps keep you on like maintain the trajectory that you have, where it's like, yeah, they deal with this in that industry too, and this is how they're fixing it.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
John, you said in the beginning that you've always had this entrepreneurial spirit and really focused on that in kind
That's
of what
probably one
led
of
you
the
to.
hardest words to say, isn't it?
It is. I did fuck that up a little
I've
bit.
been saying it for like 15 years and I still can't.
Entrepreneur. I can't say it.
Now it's going to be impossible now. I'm not going to even
You
try because of that.
John, you said in the beginning of this podcast you really like building businesses, and so in terms of being at Buildertrend, being CTO, I know there's a lot and more than we can unpack today specifically, but what are you focused on in terms of the software itself? Understanding, like, obviously you're getting to understand the industry, on a more intimate level, but what is your, let's say, your top focus in terms of what your role is and how you plan to help?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I came into Buildertrend because they hadn't had like a CTO type presence for a few years, and kind of the company had grown over that time. It'd been about 5, maybe 6 years, and the company had grown quite a bit at that time. And so there's a lot of what I'm doing that's just Buildertrend's obviously a very, very successful company before I got here. There's lots of customers that really love our software. But the company had kind of grown gangbusters, and then like a lot of it was really like homegrown and homegrown talent, and so they hadn't seen like it's probably similar to like starting a construction business, and like I've heard how much value there is in hearing from other builders how they do things. And I think that's why I'm here. Is part of it is we are going through all these growing pains, and they needed someone to come in and say, well, here's how you do this when you've got 200 people in your engineering team instead of 10,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of that I'm doing. I also, I'm not afraid to say this. I think that there had been kind of and this is normal for growing. It's a kind of a normal growing pain, but we had lost the ability to really listen to our customers, really understand their problems. And that's been a huge effort that I've made. And we've really made great strides there. And I can tell you, we have a podcast called The Building Code. I know you know that. And I've been trying to learn in all kinds of different ways. And I actually listened to the last 2 years of The Building Code. And then I went back to the beginning, and it started in 2019. And I heard us talking about delivering cost plus in 2019, 5 years ago. And
Mm.
I think we tried a couple times and just had lost that ability to listen to customers and understand what their real problem was and what we're trying to do. And so I've really reinstilled that in the team, and we started to have a lot of success. We're starting to get a lot of customers saying, hey, you're really listening to us. I can tell there's a difference. And so that's a big effort I'm making too, as well. And I think, so I think those two things, kind of really growing up our processes to operate at the scale that we are, and I think maybe the third one is I just call it focus, but it's basically like understanding who our core customer is. I kind of talked a little bit about that, and really building a really great product for that customer. Another thing I heard on our podcast, like going back in time, was One of our customers was there was a whole podcast with one of our customers who is a solar installer. And I don't have anything against solar installers, but they probably have a whole bunch of requirements of software that probably most people don't have. And so
Right.
getting, getting us focused on our core customers and our best customers and really helping their business to be successful is something I've put kind of a lot of emphasis around. So those are kind of the three areas where I've spent a lot of time. And, I think that I was in charge of the whole engineering team at Appfolio. We had a very, very successful product and highly, highly reviewed by customers. And I think one of the big reasons I came to Buildertrend, to be honest, is I'm a software engineer. I'm not like I can't cure cancer or do anything that really has huge impact on the world, but I saw at my last company how we impacted all these small family businesses and really kind of moved the needle and helped them to be successful and help them to run their businesses efficiently. We used to get these great stories of how customers could now run their businesses efficiently so they could finally take a vacation or, things like that.
Yeah.
And I came to Buildertrend because I think the businesses are very similar in some ways, these like multi-generational businesses. And I also believe like, wow, if there's an area of the world that I can touch as a lowly software engineer, housing would be one area where I can have a lot of impact. It's very indirect. It's really you guys who are impacting people's lives around their homes. But I mean, that's like one of the biggest crises facing us everywhere. It's something that impacts everyone. It touches everyone. How we think about it touches everyone. And so that got me really excited. And I think I'm hoping that like we have this tagline of change the way the world builds. And I'm hoping to impact that in like some small little way through what we're doing with our product engineering teams.
That's super cool. I appreciate, and my mind is blown and I cannot wrap my head around like how from a software engineering perspective you take customer feedback and then translate that into like actual software. That just blows my mind. So that's definitely a role that I would have to hire for as well, because the correlation between the two is like Spanish to me. I don't understand how that works, but that's it's crazy how much when you think like software engineer, when I imagine that in my head, it's not considering like the people and the customers and what they need, and the relationships and listening to past podcasts to understand how we can help people. It's more so like, how am I building software? But it's a testament to like, to make a successful business, a successful product, it really ends up, you have to solve like the people problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real analogy, which I brought up before, is like architectural plans. Like, could I learn to read architectural plans? Yes, I probably could if I spent enough time doing it. But it doesn't just come easily to me. It's somewhat technical. I bet you both can because you've looked at enough of them. Um, there's a little bit of mystery to me. It feels a little bit like mysterious. Like, how do you get to read plans so well where you can kind of picture what the house is going to look like?
Yeah.
I know like deep down I could do it. And by the way, I know deep down you could be a software engineer given enough time and
I don't
interest
know.
in it. I believe it. I could teach you. I think it's a very similar discipline. It's like there's some technicality to it and like it takes some time. But in the end, like what you're trying to do is build a house that the customer loves. And that's the same thing
Mhm.
we're trying to do with software. And you can't do that without listening to customers. I will tell you, like me included, and I say this with utmost humility. Every business like tends to think like, and I think this too. We all think this, that like we're all individual, unique snowflakes, and I think that that's less true than everyone thinks.
Yeah,
There's
Oh, I'd
absolutely.
agree with that. Yeah.
standard
We
best
we
practices, and
we want to be
enable
individual
those.
snowflakes.
Yeah, everyone does. I do too. I want to think I'm unique.
Right.
But I think that that's where software can really help you. There are just some things that like, I'm not saying like it's not different if you're doing fixed bid versus cost plus, but like a lot of that's like a little bit of configuration in the software, and the software can really help you regardless of whether you're fixed bid or cost plus.
Yeah.
And so I
I mean,
think
I
there
think
is
the
potential to help there.
bigger picture with this is something I preach a lot is find the processes and systems and software that you know takes the redundancy and like the tasks that can be repetitive and quote unquote automate that so you can focus on the craft and the deliverable to the client and focus on what does make you unique. How do you create a better end product, quality product, user experience, and allow technology to help regain your focus in the areas that you do have the opportunity to be better in.
Yeah, I mean, I look at business that way in general. It's like I want to focus on the things that are fun. And that's one thing that, I came to Buildertrend partly because there's a great culture here, but I've kind of added to that. I tell the story sometimes. If you listen to our podcasts, I tell a story, but Buildertrend's in Omaha. For those people who don't know, that's where it's based. That's where it grew up. I'm from Southern California, and I was like, how's this Southern California? I'd never spent a minute in the Midwest. And so I flew in to visit and kind of meet with everyone. And I got in about a half day early, and I started driving around, and I was like, I wonder what this Omaha thing is about. And what goes on here? Am I going to be okay spending time out here?
A lot of farming.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I think just by random luck, I was literally just driving around randomly, kind of exploring the town. And I saw a Western Outfitter, and then I saw another Western Outfitter. And I go, I'm going to go in tomorrow. I'm going to go get myself a cowboy hat, and I'm going to walk into the office and see what happens when I do that. And for those of you who don't know Omaha, I shouldn't misrepresent here. No one wears cowboy hats.
Yeah.
They certainly don't wear them in the office.
Amazing.
But I did that, and part of it was I wanted to see what the reaction was going to be. I had a sense that people weren't going to be wearing them in general, and I thought, and I know that I'm 6'9", so it makes me even more ridiculous when I'm 7'4" in a cowboy hat or whatever. And but I did that because for kind of exactly what you're saying, I want to be enjoying my work and having fun. And so you were talking about automating away the parts that you're not good at and focusing on the parts that are fun. That was exactly why I wore the cowboy hat. I want to see, is this going to be a place where I can do the hard work, but also enjoy the parts that I love to do and have fun with the people I'm working with? And it kind of matches exactly what you're talking about how software can enable you to really do the stuff that brings you joy and that you're really good at.
So I guess they like the cowboy hat if you're still around.
Yeah, they got a kick out of it. Yeah, they definitely got a kick out of it. And I knew that, hey, these people are going to accept this, weird Southern California boy.
See, Nick, that's what we need, cowboy hats.
I've always thought that.
It's on my list. I'll hang it right back here.
Yeah.
You're on the East Coast, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
I lived in Portsmouth for a brief minute there.
Okay. Yeah, so Nick's up north Boston area. I'm in New Jersey, but I'm close to Philadelphia.
Okay. Oh, you're both out there. Yeah. Very cool.
So Nick's north of me, about 5 hours northeast of me. But yeah, East Coast, not a ton of cowboy hats.
I'll send you a couple.
Hell yeah. We know that you're tight on time, so we want to be cognizant of that. But we appreciate all the insight and carving out some time in your schedule to talk with us. Next time, I definitely want you showing up in a cowboy hat.
Okay.
There's that's a non-negotiable.
Okay. Well, this has been as fun as wearing a cowboy hat. Can I say that?
Damn, that works. But you've never tried it, so you never know. I haven't either.
Yeah, John, like Tyler said, we appreciate you hopping on here, and it's cool to hear what Buildertrend's got going on behind the scenes. And that's, I think, everyone wants them to be catering to their specific needs, and to have someone in your position where you're making the customer customer experience and feedback and creating that loop to improve. And I know you guys just launched the Cost Plus, and I've chatted with a lot of you guys over there about all the stuff that you have in the pipeline. It's exciting, and to know that you guys are constantly evolving, I think is super beneficial to anyone that's using the program, but also anyone that's considering it.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you guys.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Well, good luck with the rest of the house build, and enjoy the rest of your day. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care. It's funny. I was like, I'm not going to bring up creatine, and we brought up creatine.
That's all right. It's good. I feel like it's maybe that's just the kickoff for every podcast. Have you tried creatine?
It became
Let's get
such a
Modern Craftsman creatine.
it literally became such a conversation at the Builder Show. It was
Really?
just like, yeah, and I mean, it is definitely seeing a resurgence in but it's funny, like when you said that's what people took it. I'm like, everyone has that reaction.
Yeah, I mean it was like that was like
Like
the
Joe and Adam from Cardinal Crest, like they're
yeah.
like super into it.
Really?
And he's like, "Oh yeah, our wives take it." It's like, because they're super active. It just yeah, it's funny. But
That's
no,
neat.
John's
I'll have
cool
to look into
and
it.
it's super interesting to see Buildertrend bring on someone like him. He's got such a impressive career and Appfolio and it just a testament to the commitment to making their program better and better. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so cool what they do, and like it's one of those things that I don't fully understand, but I'm glad that he made the analogy that it really is. It's not that much different than listening to your customers and then building them a house.
Yeah,
It
it's a
it made
beast.
it seem, yeah. I mean, it made but it like that connected the dots for me to understand. Okay, like so much more of it is being able to translate like wants and needs of your customer. It's not necessarily about like actually building the software, actually building a house. A lot of times that's the
Mhm.
easy part. And that finally made a little bit more sense to me because I'm like, I don't know. I have so much trouble with technology and apps and all that stuff because I like they just don't make sense to me. But that definitely helped clarify things a little bit for me. I'm like, I don't need to understand it, but I understand what the problems are.
Yeah. Well, big thanks to our sponsors, Buildertrend, of course, Andersen Windows. And if you guys haven't already registered, make sure you head over to contractorcoalitionsummit.com. We are coming to Boston September 27th through the 30th. Brad from AFT Construction, Morgan from Construction to Style, and myself and Tyler from Modern Craftsman. It's geared towards general contractors. The whole schedule is on the website. There is an early bird sign up if you want to sign up and secure your spot. We are selling tickets. I think we're over a third sold out at this point. But we're also going to be touring some of my job sites, including the 45 White Oak project. And lastly, if you want to book some time, Tyler, you got a link to book one-on-one time with you. Where can they find that link?
So I have actually found it a little bit easier for me to just do it via email because
Oh, you're crazy.
my schedule is like evolving.
Yeah, for sure.
And it day to day, week to week. So I've been basically saying like I'm not booking out more than 2 weeks in advance.
There you go.
And that I'm primarily doing them on Tuesdays between 9 and let's say 1:30 or so, just so the kids are out of the house. I can
Eastern
fit it into
Standard
my
Time.
schedule, Eastern Standard Time. So Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. And that's been actually really good, really enjoyable. I'm usually doing around 2 a week. And if there's an odd off time, it's just easier for me to find a time that works for everyone via email. So that's been working out best for me.
And you guys
But
certainly can email me. Go ahead.
I was going to say Contractor Coalition Summit, which we'll circle back to you, but we're going to tour your project before the actual event, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So being out recently at the one in Minnesota, and like I came in at basically the tour bus was letting off. And so by the time the event started, I was there and it was like, all right, we're going to have a happy hour, do the podcast, and then get right to the educational aspect of it. And it like didn't necessarily leave enough time for me to get to know everyone. So I would highly recommend getting there before the event to start
Great
like
point.
like start talking to people.
Hmm.
I think that it allows you to be open and honest and more transparent with your business because now you're not in a room full of strangers. And I think that to maximize what you want to get out of this experience, you have to feel comfortable around all of these people. And if you take a day and a half and you're doing something work related but fun and getting to know these people beforehand, that once the educational aspect and like the more formal aspect of the event starts, you're going to be so far ahead, like you're hitting the ground running. So if you're doing this, you're investing the money and you want to get as much out of it, definitely go to the pre-events prior to the actual coalition. It's going to be worth it for you.
And I was just
So
going to
back,
say, yeah, you
all
can
right,
definitely email me, but if you want to schedule one-on-one, nickschiffer.com. It's up there. There's a whole schedule. You can select the time. Similar to Tyler, I'm doing just about 2 a week. But I find it super fun, and you know, it's uninterrupted, dedicated time, one-on-one phone call, and I get a lot out of it. And I hope to provide, if not the same, more than you're bringing to the conversation as well. So nickschiffer.com, and as always, moderncraftsman.co. We get some swag up there. We have a newsletter set up, so if you guys want the behind the scenes of what's going on with all the stuff that we're launching, outside of the podcast, which if you're not aware of, make sure you head over to the website, moderncraftsman.co, fill in your email in the pop-up, and we will keep you in the loop.
cat's out of the bag. Almost.